I am super excited for this next guest. Very, very excited. She is Beaver Lake Creek First Nation activist, a Sierra Club Prairie activist, and the Peace River Tar campaigner for the Indigenous Environmental Network in Alberta, Canada, and a mother of two. With infectious dedication and passion, Crystal Lameman is committed to restoring Native treaty rights and stopping the expansion of the tar sands. Crystal is involved in the work of her nation to take the Canadian government to court over 17,000 treaty violations. In May 2008, the Beaver Lake Cree Nation filed a statement of claim in Alberta's Court of Queen's Bench, taking the Government of Canada to court. In March 2012, they were granted a trial. This trial stands as a precedent for other oil sand rights violations, and today Crystal Lameman will talk to you about what she's doing and what's happening from here on out. Crystal?
I snuck in. Whoa. Let's try down here. Okay, try this out. I'll learn my lesson yet. I always put my notes on my phone that apply on me yet. Good morning. Dan said hello. First of all, I want to say Nanaskamun. I'm grateful to the Ohlone people whose territory and now called San Francisco, from my understanding. I want to start by just paying some homage to one of the chiefs that is known as the United States First Nations people of Turtle Island. Oh yeah, you don't see that border. We all live here. So Lakota chief and holy man, he said, for us, warriors are not what you think of as warriors. The warrior is not someone who fights, because no one has the right to take another's life. The warrior, for us, is one who sacrifices himself for the good of others. His task is to take care of the elderly, the defenseless, those who cannot provide for themselves, and above all, children and the future of all humanity. And as a person who comes from the Cree tribe in northern Alberta, we have beliefs that are passed down to us from our old people, constantly sharing with us those stories, those reminders, how to walk, how to take care of one another. And I was lucky enough to be raised by my grandmother, and she always told me, as do my uncles, when you go about things in a good way, always being careful, and you always have the best intentions, Mamo Thawi Nan, our Creator, will never leave you alone. Each and every person in this room has that. Agame Hitamuin. Persevere. carry that. And I carry those words because as a First Nation, that person that comes from an area, from the front lines, from the source, our sense, my nation is located right in the middle of the three parts of Alberta. And as a person who comes from there, as a First Nations person, we're incessantly having to deal with atrocities, most recently Bill C-38, which gutted the environmental laws in Canada. Bill C-45, which affected our land and our water, not just First Nations people, but as a whole. The Navigable Waters Act was passed within Bill C-45. On one day, we had 2.5 million protected lakes and rivers in Canada. The following day, we had 97 lakes and 62 protected rivers, all in the name of industry. Because that's what it is. Let's be truthful. And as a woman, as a First Nations woman, who takes seriously those things that I was taught, it's my obligation as a woman to take care of the water. Because we believe that women are the keepers of the water. It's not by chance that women carry their unborn in water. And when I think about those teachings, I think about the things we're enduring right now. If 38 and 45 weren't bad enough, we were lucky enough to find out, well, not so lucky, but in 10 months, there was this document that was leaked. And this document was a list of demands that was given by industry to the Canadian government. On that list of demands, it was to pass 38, it was to pass 45, it was to pull out from the Kyoto Protocol to sign people with China. All in the name of industry. In 10 months, industry made this list of demands to the Canadian government in 2 months. They achieved everything. And that's why we've made this shift in just a short amount of time. I was born in '82. And when I think about the story, my uncle Al Lameman, the former retired chief of the Beaver Lake Cree Nation, was chief for 35 years. When he shares those stories about how he sat with the chiefs in general meetings back in the 80s, and he would sit there and he would tell them, there's going to come a time and day when you're going to buy your water to drink. This was just in the 80s. People weren't buying bottled water yet. They were drinking from the tap, they were drinking from the slough, they were drinking from the lakes, and they weren't getting sick. But now we're airlifting our babies to the local hospital, to the university hospitals for drinking contaminated water. That's a reality, that's the truth. How many people in here would walk up to any lake, any slough, any river, any stream and just freely drink that water without fear of getting sick? There was a time when we could do that, and that wasn't that long ago. And as a member of the Beaver Lake Cree Nation, who entered into treaty in 1876, it was told to us that as long as the sun shines, the rivers flow, and the grass grows, we will always have an obligation and an inherent right to the land. Within that treaty, We have a traditional hunting territory. The land that we were told we could always go to sustain ourselves. 39,000 square kilometers to sustain ourselves. We did not cede, lease, or surrender any of our land. We said we would share it. We were promised that we could always go to the land as we did yesterday, and the day before that, and the day before that. And that we could always go to the land the same way tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that. Our treaty is enshrined in the Canadian Constitution. And as First Nations people who entered into treaty, we have the power to stop these pipelines, these developments, and the encroachment on what little we have left. Because where we went from 39,000 square kilometers of pristine land, every single thing a human being needs to survive was right there at our fingertips. We could go out the front door and literally, as a child, I remember this, we could set a snare in the evening time. By the next morning, we had a rabbit. We had something. We had our food for the next day. Today, now, it's not that way. We have gone from thousands of caribou to now between 175 and 275 caribou. And the Canadian government had to respond to this because, as the Beaver Lake Cree, this is our traditional hunting territory. We have a right to this land, and we have a right to say what happens here. And you failed to follow through with your duty to consult with the Beaver Lake Cree. So what my Uncle Al did in 2008 was he filed a statement of claim to the Alberta Court of Queen's Bench. And within that, he cited 17,000 treaty violations and infringements. 17,000 permits granted to Big Oil without consulting the Beaver Lake Cree. He stood up in recognition of who we are as human beings, not just as First Nations people. This fight he took on was for everyone. And I didn't come here to sell you anything. We have one thing, each and every one of us in this room. We have one thing that industry, pro-industry people, and government will never have. And that's our governments have become deliberately ignorant of who we are. Joe Oliver, our natural resources minister, was quoted in CBC saying, "Tar Sands land is uninhabitable by human beings. So you know, no community is being disrupted." Well, that land he's talking about, that's the Beaver Lake Cree traditional territory. And last time I checked, we lived there. We lived there. We never went anywhere, and nor do we plan to. We live there. Non-First Nations people live there. Human beings live there. So this land he's talking about that's uninhabitable, my curiosity is, what are you saying? First Nations people don't exist? We're not here? You're so deliberately ignorant that you even refuse to accept. But you know what? We've endured colonization, assimilation, oppression, residential schools. We've endured it all. And it's only further helped us. It's only further created the interconnectedness of seeing beyond race, color, and creed. So when things like that are said, I do stand back and say, thank you, Harper. Thank you, Joe Oliver. Thank you, Alberta Premier Redford, because you've just further mobilized this movement. Thank you. If you drink water and you breathe air, this is about you. This is about our governments. This is about anybody who breathes air and drinks water. And water is the one thing that connects each and every one of us in this room. Each and every one of us as human beings, water is that one thing that connects each and every one of us. It's the giver of life. It is life. And when I look at where we are as a human race, economic hostages, where our governments play environmental roulette with our lives, someone always loses in that game. And it's going to be me. It's going to be my children. It's going to be you and your children and our future generations. And I'm not okay with that. And I will not be that mother whose children ask her in the future, Mama, why didn't you do anything? I will not pacify myself or my children with money. Because like my Uncle Al says, when disaster strikes, it's not going to know race, color, or creed. When that happens, we will realize that we cannot eat money and we cannot drink oil. You could be the next ones sitting at those negotiating tables. And you have an obligation to those that cannot speak for themselves. Just like I have that same obligation to those air beings, those land beings, those water beings. I have an obligation as a mother. Because I tell you, it's not easy leaving my children. I'm an elementary school teacher. And I've had to give that up because my children's lives are at stake. And we all have that obligation. And it's not easy leaving them. They're 4 and 6, and they need me. I'm a single mother. But whatever it takes, I will pursue, because my children depend on me. I want to share a little story with you. Chief Big Bear comes from the Treaty 6 territory up in my area. And he resisted Treaty number 6 signing back in 1876. And through our literal translation, that story was passed down because we have an oral history, we don't write things down. This was a time when we still tied our horses to the camp so they wouldn't stray, rope around their neck. And through the literal translation, old people talk about it, that Chief Big Bear was a foreteller. He could see in the future. And through the literal translation, it was said, this is what he said: I and my people will not be led around with ropes around our necks. He knew what was going to happen. He knew where we would be. Our old people talk about that story where a black snake was weaved all over Turtle Island. This black snake was under the ground. That's this pipeline. And I think about Chief Big Bear and his words. And though we are at the point we are now, we can't give up. Agame Tamuin. We have to persevere. We have to keep on keeping on. Because reclamation for me is not BS like that. Because that there is what they say is reclamation. That's the Sahara Desert and the Northern Boreal forests. Right there used to be green, luscious trees. That land right there can never be reclaimed. Reclamation is not that for me. Reclamation is me standing here with the 99%, planting the seeds of knowledge. Reclamation for me is taking back who I am as a First Nations person, as a human being, as a mother, as a woman, and standing up for myself and taking back my power. And we all have that same obligation. I want to make one little comment. Every year for 4 years, the movement up there in Alberta coordinated tar sands healing walk up in the Fort McMurray area, right where I'm standing there. It's one of the areas that we actually walk by. And as First Nations people, we believe in that healing. We can't carry negativity. We can't carry hate because it's not going to get us anywhere. So this year, on July 5th and 6th, in Fort McMurray, Alberta, you can go to the Facebook page, you can go to the website, the Athabasca, for the further information. But on July 5th and 6th this year, we'll be having the 4th annual Healing Walk, and we have confirmed attendance by Bill McKibben, Naomi Klein, Wainuma Leduc, and many others. And if I'm going to leave you with anything, there we go. Okay. If I'm going to leave you with anything, it's to remember that y'all aren't that far away from us. Okay? That border, that's not going to protect you. And I know that you all know that. That's why you're here. But you take that and you carry that and you share that with whoever will listen to you. Because I always say that it's worth what I do. It's worth leaving my children. That if I can just affect one person in that room, then I've done my job. I do it because I think about our old people, how they talk about the fish, how they don't taste good anymore, how they have cancers hanging off of them, that we're taking moose from the land that have pus bubbles under the skin, that we don't hear the frogs anymore. frogs are the first things to go in an area that's you're all smart. And this is what our future is. And I'm not okay with that. So what does divestment look like? This is what divestment looks like. I'm grateful to each and every one of you. Thank you.